Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In Iran, over 2,500 people have died in anti-government protests over the collapsing economy. This, according to the U.S.-based human rights activist news agency. CBS is reporting sources inside Iran say between 12 and 20,000 protesters have been killed. A 26-year-old protester, Irfan Soltani, who was detained last week, is reportedly set to be executed today. An ophthalmologist in Tehran told The Guardian that a single hospital documented more than 400 eye injuries from gunshots. Meanwhile, Iranian authorities claim to have regained control of the country after 2 weeks of mass protests. Funerals for security forces killed during the protests have turned into large pro-government rallies. Iranian authorities have imposed an internet blackout across Iran. Meanwhile, President Trump vowed to intervene in Iran, saying, quote, "Help is on the way," and urged the protesters to, quote, "take over your institutions if you can," unquote. This comes as the Washington Post reports top officials at the White House are weighing military options against Iran. This is an Iranian activist in Rome who cautioned against foreign military intervention.
We don't need any foreign country to give us any support except be our voice, and don't support our governor, because that is totally enough for us. That we just need that the politician abroad don't support our governor and don't give voice to them, except despite of that, give the voice to the population. And that's enough for us, because our population is doing their part, and I'm super sure that they can succeed.
In the United States, the Justice Department has released a memo to the public stating President Trump had the constitutional power to deploy a U.S. military attack on Venezuela and kidnap President Nicolas Maduro and his wife without congressional authorization. The memo, released Tuesday, is dated December 23rd, just days ahead of the military strike in Venezuela, in which at least 80 people were killed, including civilians. The U.S. attack has been widely condemned as a violation of international law. The interim Venezuelan government, led by Delcy Rodriguez, has released at least 4 U.S. citizens who were imprisoned in Venezuela. A number of other prisoners have also been released, including Venezuelan opposition figures and activists. The Venezuela human rights group Foro Penal said as of Tuesday, at least 56 people detained in Venezuela reportedly for political reasons have been released in recent days. In more related news, oil imports from Venezuela to China are expected to plummet starting in February as the U.S. has claimed control of Venezuela's reserves and imposed a naval blockade on Venezuela. Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel has said his government's not currently in talks with Washington, remaining defiant as the Trump administration attempts to pressure Cuba into making a deal with the U.S. after the military strike on Venezuela. In a series of posts on X, Diaz-Canel said, quote, "As history demonstrates, relations between the U.S. and Cuba, in order to advance, must be based on international law rather than on hostility, threats, and economic coercion," unquote, Diaz-Canel said. His comments came after Trump announced Sunday Cuba will no longer be receiving Venezuela oil, which has been a lifeline for the island that's been devastated by decades of U.S. economic sanctions. Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio are expected to meet with the leaders of Denmark and Greenland at the White House today. Ahead of the visit, President Trump again called for the U.S. to militarily take over Greenland, posting on Truth Social, quote, "NATO becomes far more formidable and effective with Greenland in the hands of the United States. Anything less than that is unacceptable," Trump wrote. 6 federal prosecutors in the Minneapolis U.S. Attorney's Office resigned Tuesday over the Justice Department's criminal probe into Becca Good, the widow of Renee Good, who was fatally shot by an ICE officer last week. Former acting U.S. Attorney Joe Thompson resigned, along with senior career prosecutors Harry Jacobs, Melinda Williams, Thomas Calhoun Lopez, Ruth Schneider, and Tom Hollenhurst. In Washington, D.C., 5 senior prosecutors in the criminal wing of the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division also said they're leaving after the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, said, quote, there's currently no basis for a criminal civil rights investigation into the fatal shooting of Renee Good. Instead, the DOJ launched an investigation to examine ties between Renee Good and her wife, Becca Good, and several Minneapolis groups that have been monitoring and protesting ICE raids. Their child's school sent a message to parents saying, quote, thank you to families who've been on ICE watch, helping to protect their neighbors, unquote. We'll have more on that story later in the broadcast. The Trump administration suspending federal funding for sanctuary cities and states starting in February as part of an escalating crackdown on immigration. In remarks Tuesday at the Detroit Economic Club, President Trump falsely claimed without any evidence that sanctuary policies lead to fraud and crime. Data, including by the American Immigration Council, has repeatedly shown immigrants are less likely to commit crimes. The states of California, New York, and Illinois are among those considered sanctuary jurisdictions with policies in place that limit local law enforcement collaborating with federal immigration agencies. In more immigration news, the Trump administration's ending temporary protected status, TPS, for people from Somalia, putting over 2,000 Somalis at risk of deportation. The Homeland Security Department has given Somalis living in the U.S. with TPS until March to leave the U.S. or face removal. As part of his escalating racist attacks on the Somali immigrant community, President Trump doubled down on his threats Tuesday.
We're also going to revoke the citizenship of any naturalized immigrant from Somalia or anywhere else who is convicted of defrauding our citizens. We're going to get them the hell out of here fast. And if you come to America to rob Americans, we're throwing you in jail and we're sending you back to the place from where you came. We're throwing you right in jail. And they know it, too.
The Council on American Islamic Relations, CAIR, condemned this as, quote, a bigoted attack, saying in a statement, quote, this decision does not reflect changed conditions in Somalia by dismantling protections for one of the most vulnerable Black and Muslim communities. This decision exposes an agenda rooted in exclusion, not public safety, CAIR said. The conservative majority Supreme Court signaled Tuesday it'll rule to uphold state laws in Idaho and West Virginia that bar transgender girls from participating in school sports. 2 transgender girls, one in college in Idaho, the other in 5th grade in West Virginia, wanted to be part of their school's track teams, but state laws prevented them from participating. Soon after taking office, President Trump had signed an executive order to direct federal agencies to withdraw funding from schools that allow transgender girls to compete in women's sports. On Tuesday, protesters gathered outside the Supreme Court as justices heard oral arguments. This is Kim Villanueva, the president of the National Organization of Women.
You know, we are always trying to fight back against patriarchy and the fact that people are trying to confine women and girls into one role. And we want women and girls to have the full expression that they are able to have. And that includes if you're being trans. Again, we think trans rights are human rights.
We'll have more on this story later in the broadcast. In New York, the far-right pro-Israel group Betar US will end its operations in New York following an investigation by Attorney General Letitia James that found the Zionist group engaged in a widespread campaign of persecution, physical intimidation, assault, threats, and harassment against Muslim, Arab, Palestinian, and Jewish New Yorkers involved in pro-Palestine activism. In a statement, Attorney General James said, quote, my office's investigation uncovered an alarming and illegal pattern of bias-motivated harassment and violence designed to terrorize communities and shut down lawful protest. New York will not tolerate organizations that use fear, violence, and intimidation to silence free expression or target people because of who they are, unquote. Attorney General James said in the statement. New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani celebrated the announcement, saying Betar had, quote, sowed a campaign of hatred across New York, unquote. Betar referred to Mamdani, the city's first Muslim mayor, as Jihad Mamdani. The state of Louisiana is seeking to extradite a California doctor for providing abortion pills. The extradition order came after Louisiana Attorney General Liz Murrill announced the indictment against the doctor who's been identified as Remy Coito. This is the second time Louisiana's Republican leadership has sought to criminally prosecute and extradite an out-of-state doctor over the prescription of abortion pills. Last year, Louisiana indicted a New York doctor, Margaret Carpenter. And Claudette Colvin, a pioneer in the civil rights movement, has died at the age of 86. As a 15-year-old, Claudette refused to give up her seat on a segregated bus in Montgomery, Alabama, 9 months before Rosa Parks made history. Claudette Colvin was charged with assault and disorderly conduct in addition to violating segregation laws. She later spent her life as a nurse's aide caring for elderly patients. This is Claudette Colvin on Democracy Now! In 2013, recounting what inspired her to challenge Jim Crow.
Why didn't you get up when the bus driver asked you and the policeman? I said I could not move because history had me glued to the seat. And they say, how is that? I say, because it felt like soldier on the truth, hands were pushing me down on one shoulder, and Harriet Tubman, hands were pushing me down on another shoulder.
To see our full interview with Claudette Colvin and our interviews about her over the years, go to democracynow.org. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.